No. A lover. No.
House of the Dragon video.
Before the mighty and terrible Lord.
House of the Dragon video.
House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 8 is here, and it's one hell of an episode. You know, despite consistently enjoying this season, I've not been shy with my criticisms. There's a lot I felt has been flawed, and I was really sceptical if the finale could deliver. Had they set up enough to give themselves proper time here? Yes, they absolutely had. What I didn't take into account was the finale being an hour and 10 minutes long, giving them a good half an hour at the start of this episode to just move everything into place. You feel all the different characters and plot threads converging on Tumbleton, everything with the exception of maybe Aemond steering right towards this big climactic battle that gives this episode such a strong structure. Like, events feel propelled forwards like an unstoppable train. There's so much tension built up to this climactic battle. I had an absolute blast before the battle even began, and I find it quite difficult to criticise this episode at all. I'm going to do it slightly for the sake of balance, but mostly I have good things to say, and in particular something quite thematically clever that I think ties this whole season together really nicely. So if you're interested to learn what that is, then stick around and check out this cool train. By the way, if the audio levels of my voice are a little bit up and down this time, that's because I'm holding the microphone in my hand while I sit on the floor of my parents' spare bedroom, because our neighbours back home today decided to do a lot of very loud construction work, and I think this would be better. I'm going to try and level my voice out in Audacity, but I've never been good at that kind of thing. I'm bad at the business side of YouTube and the editing side. I think you can probably already tell that from my channel. But anyway, let's start with minor criticism. This episode is a little bit too much of a TV spectacle for my liking, I would say. A little bit too keen to give us some of the Marvel superhero level moments of fun that just ever so faintly not break my immersion, just kind of lightly graze against it. Having this big showdown between Daemon and Roxton, for example, felt a bit forced for the sake of a cool fight scene, especially when Roxton starts showing shades of Sir Gregor here, or Roderick Dustin perhaps coming just a bit too much of a caricature of himself, a bit too bombastic. Both of those examples are still very fun, of course. Roderick and his men all groaning in disappointment that they're still alive is a fun joke, so I can kind of forgive this stuff. I just think most of the scenes of this battle are slightly too fun. That makes me sound boring, but too Hollywood entertainment gloss rather than tragic, disastrous consequences of war in the tone they're going for here. But equally, there's a lot of the audience who will have been relishing that kind of spectacle, so I can't blame them for leaning into it a fair bit here. The touches we see of the children cowering on the walls as well, and Daemon noticing the devastation around him, I think helped to mitigate a lot of that and keep some of the tragic feel here as well. So, this is hardly a criticism at all. And that actually could be one of my favourite moments this episode, actually. The contrast where we see Daemon, who has often appeared surprisingly kind of sensible for a lot of this season, at least in how it's been framed. A good portion of the arguments he's made at court and made to Rhaenyra have sounded pragmatic, things Rhaenyra probably should have heeded, and now that Rhaenyra's finally been listening and he's been given charge to lead a battle, he goes a bit mask off and absolutely chooses the path of bloodshed, and you realise, okay, this isn't just about pragmatism anymore, it's also about Daemon's personal desires and impulses here, where Corlys had suggested something that seems way more pragmatic than anything Daemon was saying in the past. So forming an alliance with Gwaine and Darragh and not just gaining the Hightower forces and crucially their riches, which they're in need of, likely better leveraging some support or at least less hostility from the Faith of the Seven, although Corlys obviously doesn't know Alan just stabbed the High Septon, but gaining Daeron's dragon, that could be massively helpful. So I think surprisingly there is a lot of sense to this proposal. But Corlys, not his finest moments, tells Daemon Rhaenyra will win either way, so it's simply a choice of whether Daemon wants bloodshed or peace. And I mean, don't frame it like that, Corlys. Of course he's going to choose bloodshed and getting to burn things when you make it a choice between the two where he wins either way, with his dragon getting to use and getting to feel all wild and powerful again. Daemon has been getting a bit too caught up in the ambitions of a new Valyria and being like a divine himself. Just a bit of that darker Daemon now really comes to the surface again, and you realise his own fantasies aren't too far removed from Ormond's madness, and he then goes forth and happily burns a few kids. So we've got that on the one side, and then Tumbleton tumbles on Damon less successfully than on Jamie and Cersei, and he actually sees all the deaths around him, actually recognises the consequences here, and I really like that. I don't know if he's going to learn anything from this, but I like seeing that. I think it's a good contrast to how Damon was earlier this episode. I was supposed to be talking about criticisms right now, but I think I've ran out already. Rhaenyra killing the High Septum is arguably a ludicrous thing to do. Aegon the Conqueror, I think, only ever threatened it, and even then did so in circumstances where he'd get his way. What's the point in stabbing this guy to death if you're not going to get an anointment out of it anyway? It's not like you can kill him and just point to another septon and go, you, take his place, anoint me or die, because you need a whole ceremony for a new High Septum to be appointed at Oldstone, which would take ages, and there's all the concern about Oldtown not being on your side here. So after the High Septum says no, you can either try to make him with further threats, try to force him, or you can accept this won't work right now and go and give her speech about prophecies instead and hope that's enough to persuade people. But if it's the second option, why kill him then? Just arrest him. Just do something that doesn't make you look like a total villain for no gain. There's literally no benefit to killing the High Septon here. But at the same time, I like that decision from her. I think it's believably stupid for where Rhaenyra is in herself right now. All of her impulses have flipped against trying to model Viserys into almost feeling betrayed by his example and very desperate for anything that validates a sense of power. I believe Rhaenyra would do this. I believe it presents to her the arguments that I am above the gods that I'm now quite paranoid of, that I'm feeling are against me, that I'm feeling are going to do my ruin. The arguments, I am the blood of Valyria and these are lesser gods to me, it is something that would appeal to her, and killing the High Septon kind of feeds into that. I believe she'd lock Baelor away and force feed Helena, and you know, everyone who kept complaining that this show is too kind to Rhaenyra always frames her as perfect, where the Greens are the baddies and Rhaenyra can never do any wrong, and arguing that this is somehow woke feminism. Can we finally put that argument to bed now? Rhaenyra was always going to become a villain, but you have to build to that. You have to progress the story in that direction, to have us consistently try to empathise and understand her perspective, and to genuinely understand it, and then see things slowly descend further and further until it's obvious she is becoming Rhaenyra the Cruel, and we can't quite empathise the way we once did. That is where this is heading. We're going to see a very different Rhaenyra in Season 4. I can see a good arc of Aelin torn between duty and concern around Rhaenyra next season. Rhaenyra is the Mad Queen arc they attempted for Daenerys, but done right, I would say. And when done right, there isn't technically any madness at all. That's more going to be the kind of points her opponents make about her, call her mad, what historians say in the future. We can totally understand and follow how she got here to a point that ominously hints a lot worse for next season, which will be, I guess, another 2 years again? It's a long wait. You know, it's been slow progress with Rhaenyra as a character and her arc. It's been lumbering at points, occasionally a bit meandering and confusing across the whole 3 seasons, but very much worth it to get to this point now. I would much rather some of the messiness and the confusion in order to get it right by the end than to rush it and do like a version of Daenerys again. So I'm happy there. But is it time I get to the main point of this video now? The thing I really wanted to discuss? Yes. World Anvil! Yep, they are sponsoring this video. World Anvil is an online tool for game masters, for writers, for tabletop RPG players and world builders. An online tool for designing worlds, creating characters, chronicling history, planning and managing campaigns from a plethora of different games. My best friend uses it for our D&D campaign, I use it for planning my novel. Far better and easier than the scraps of random A4 paper stuffed into a drawer that used to constitute my creative process. Not only can I keep everything in one place where I can easily edit anything I want to, but I can create timelines, hyperlinks branching off to specific characters or articles, family trees, a billion other things. You can even link them all to maps, like here's this basic map I made years ago. If I click on the character Tess, it sends me straight to her page where everything is redacted, and that's like the most basic thing you can do with your maps. There's other creators whose world building looks so much nicer than mine. There's a whole community network on World Anvil if that's your thing. There's so many different cool features for everything you may possibly need. In general, there's been lots of great updates recently, making the interface even simpler and smoother than it already was. World Anvil is great. great. I am genuinely passionate. I hope you can hear that. And if you desire, if you crave, if you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description or the pinned comment. And if you just want to try out the free version, then go for it. There's no time limit. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. I very much enjoyed Ormond's death. I said it would happen. I mean, it wasn't a really difficult prediction to make, but it's satisfying nonetheless because of the metaphor behind it that I talked about a lot last video. The whole metaphor of Ormond's sensitivity to smells and how it also reflects his very rigid obsession with all things highbrow and sophisticated. There is a very brutish man at the heart of Ormond who tries to kid himself he's the total opposite and projects all the brutality solely onto the Targaryens, where he then swans around eating fruit and playing Savas and being appalled by anything less highbrow and more base that reminds him of reality. When Alicent had originally made that comment about him being sensitive to smells, there was a lot of people talking about how this is going to be a plot point and how smell is going to be somehow used against him, and I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad they just kept it a metaphor, because I think that's the key point here. Ormond has fought himself incredibly clever. He's literally used the metaphor of Savas himself to talk about Ulf being his piece on the board. He's liked to think of himself as so much smarter and more cultured than these Targaryen savages. In his mind, he obviously outpaces them strategically. Obviously, he's one step ahead in all things. Fancies himself a bit of a Littlefinger until it all comes crashing down on his head, as surely everyone else knew it would. Camping out here in a badly fortified Tumbleton and naming Daeron a new king sounds brilliant when you think you've got all sorts of cunning ideas to get out of it, all sorts of cunning plans, but then Baldric always thought he had cunning plans, you know? The thing about war is that it's clearly not Savas. You might like to imagine you have all the scope and mastery over the board, but the pieces you intend to move still have minds of their own, and unexpected things happen all of the time, sometimes stupid things, ridiculous things, tragic, chaotic. The guy you spent ages coaxing to your side might just get really drunk and then fed up when you chide him and burn everything down, because that's the kind of mood he's in. You can place children on the walls to try and dissuade a dragon attack, but Daemon may just not care. Or potentially the reverse, place children on the walls to try and taunt Daemon into making Rhaenyra's reign look cruel, but again, Daemon may not care, and it hardly matters how cruel her reign looks if you're dead. Or if you treat Gwaine and Daeron like they're simply your pawns, and you tell them nothing of your plan, and you just make smirks about having ideas, and you don't confide in them, they might then just think you've lost your mind, and then feel they have to act on their own accord, which means freeing your very valuable hostage. These are all quite stupid mistakes of Ormond, but entirely believable due to the arrogance and the hubris he's had this entire season. War looks very easy and almost refined, almost a fascinating study when you're sitting around a table planning and imagining all the things you can do, but the reality smells a lot worse. The reality is ugly and often senseless and stupid and chaotic. So many things happen in this battle that no one expected to happen here on both sides of it, and Ormond's death is just perfect in that sense. He deftly manages to cut the arm from an angry savage like Roderick, but the man doesn't give up anyway. The old lad's made of grits and more sterner stuff, the strength of brutishness, I suppose. Fighting on, where Ormond is then confronted with the grisly, uncivilized sight of a man bleeding from the stump of an arm, it makes him go to throw up. And as a result of feeling sick, Roderick gets the drop on him. It's a perfectly kind of poetic death here. Adds to that also witnessing Ulf turn to burn everything around you, knowing you're about to be scorched alive while Roderick himself laughs about it. It's an almost WWE moment of villain comeuppance, but it was totally earned and perfectly executed and perfectly fitting. And very similar to the realization I think Daemon was having at the end of this battle. As already discussed, very similar to Hugh even. I wondered if he too was going to turn on Rhaenyra this season. Perhaps he will next season, but I get the sense he's going to just become totally disillusioned with the idea of dragon power altogether and absent himself from the war. When you see how easily a random bloke can just get drunk and burn hundreds, if not thousands of people alive, many of them innocent, all because of, what, he didn't get the respect he thought he demanded simply for having a dragon, then it's hard to believe in dragon power anymore. It has cost Hugh everything he ever loved. He thought the power made him impressive and regal, but does it? are people in general going to want dragons anymore? That's arguably been the slow progression from the beginning of this entire show, isn't it? People becoming more and more fed up with dragons. Rhaenyra's whole argument to the people to justify her reign when she couldn't get anointed, which was also quite foolish, by the way, assembling the people before you know how the High Septon will react. This speaks of someone just so desperate to get on with it now that she hasn't put the preparation in. But I love the contrast between how close she was to the people last time she was here making a speech compared to now. But yeah, her whole argument is basically that the prophecy you've not heard of says that we will need dragons to defend you from a threat you don't really know anything about, and because I have the most dragons, I am the best person to defend you. And I mean, that hardly looks a great defense when Ulf can just use those dragons to burn whoever the hell he wants, does it? You know, that doesn't make them look like protectors. It's almost like the argument a mafia leader would make. You need the protection of my thugs who will happily break your kneecaps anytime. They will defend you from other vague dangers to your business. Or to your kneecaps. I'm assuming no one's going to take this prophecy argument seriously, because otherwise everyone would know about it in the later series and that would be a massive plot hole, so I'm guessing this all just gets written off as madness or something. This battle is a real turning point, not just for Rhaenyra, I think, but for dragons as a whole. And also, war is clearly not a game anymore. We've seen the show make this point numerous times, but this feels like the first time characters themselves are really forced to accept that. It's just tragic and bloody. There isn't a level of savas or game to this anymore. You can't just make it go your way. Everyone's hands are going to be sullied. Everyone is going to suffer. There is no good outcome. There is only the relief of a possible end. Let me make a quick few final points. So yeah, I hinted it earlier, Ulf is great this episode. A great, quite unique example of a villain, I think. He's an ordinary guy who wants to be respected and taken seriously, and on the one hand, it's entirely correct the Highborn will never take him seriously. They will always look down on him for his upbringing, the matter the dragon, and he has very good reason to be angry with them about it. The whole system to life in Westeros is completely unfair. Rhaenyra, Daemon, Ormond all treat him like a misbehaving dog. At the same time, he has done nothing to earn anyone's respect in the first place, and resents the idea that he might have to. He expects it to all just be given to him freely as a result of owning a dragon, and there's kind of nothing else he wants beyond that respect. No other purpose to him, just respect for respect's sake. Even his mates in the pub are less mates than people just wanting to benefit from his newfound power. He's bitter and cynical, and I think kind of angry at himself deep down. He's crashing out, drunkenly calling Rhaenyra a queen of bastards despite being one himself. And I suspect half of this is the drink. I don't know if he'd have gone this far were he sober, but he's killing thousands of people. Many people who grew up just like him, simply because 3 specific people never gave him the power and the respect he wanted. That's villain behaviour. You know, that's not cunning or purposeful or moustache-twirling kind of villainy. It's just very pathetic and petty, and I like that a lot. This is again why you don't just trust some random dude with nuclear weapons, much less people with fragile egos. I can't possibly imagine anyone allowing that to happen in the modern world, can you? Placing weapons of mass destruction into the hands of a child. Alice was good this episode, to my surprise. Yeah, I quite liked this strange reveal hinting she was Harren the Black's wife. It's bizarre, and I think it makes some of the lore feel a bit too circular, but it still brings back a bit of mysticism to a character that we'd lost earlier this season, and it does leave me suspicious of her again, which is interesting, because a Targaryen burned everyone she ever loved. Why is she so keen to marry one now then? What's her game? I feel like there's something we don't quite know going on here. I also feel sorry for her because Aemond is given a choice at the end of this episode, and he's obviously going to choose Aegon over her, and all of her work will probably have been for nothing. Tom Glencarny as Aegon gets to chew up a scene perfectly. I mean, this is having a bit of fun and spectacle, but it suits here. Aegon has not substantially changed despite his long journey around Westeros as a commoner, seeing the lives of the small folk. A lot of people pushed back at me when I said this last video, but I wasn't saying his arc had no purpose at all this season. He very much finds his willpower again, his Targaryen ferocity, and he makes a nice gesture to Tyland and Larys when he thought things were hopeless and that he was doomed to die. But the second it's not hopeless anymore and that he gets Sunfire back, it feels like the old Aegon who has learned nothing. He's still just as cruel and self-centered as he ever was. And he does have an arc, but I don't think it required quite as many scenes as we get every single episode this season of him mostly just walking about being threatened by random people, having to hide who he is, and then potentially them finding out before dying. ending. I think you could have trimmed a lot of that down. I think a lot of it did feel quite formulaic and repetitive. But he ends the season very well. I very much enjoy it. Helena dies, as I've been worried she would, and it's awful. She felt trapped, she had no one to trust, she had wanted to have this baby because of course she did after Blood and Cheese, where she was made to feel like she killed her own child. Of course it's not her fault, but that's how she felt, so of course she wants to keep this one. However, having decided that, it becomes more obvious to her each day that this will mean the equally difficult task of having to protect the child in a really impossible environment. She's trapped here. She can't let something like Blood and Cheese happen again, but how can she protect a possible son while Rhaenyra rules? She can't live with herself if the baby doesn't live, but the baby can't live. And perhaps if Alicent was still there, she could help Helena manage the feelings here, see it a bit differently, but no one's there. Even Jaheira is kept away from her. And she keeps having these visions of herself dying, and when that starts to feel inevitable, like you're supposed to die, when that keeps playing in your head like music you can't switch off, I can understand why she gives into it. It's horrible, it's the most tragic thing this season. I hate it, but it's damn good television and a great way to end the season. I just wonder what Jaheira will think. Helena, of course, loved her and cared about her, but should she get to live through this conflict, Jaheira may be plagued with the question of why her mum died, and I don't think anybody other than Helena herself can explain that. Jaheira may never get to understand, and you know, that's horribly real. I suppose in this world of Westeros, they'll just chalk down it to some unknown act of madness from Helena, say that she lost her mind. But again, I don't think she did. I think it's a lot more complex than that, and that's kind of the tragedy here, because no one will understand. Someone else who's left with a lot of questions for Helena is Rhaenyra. She has finally noticed the stitch work now that Helena is gone, and seen there is a vision of Rhaenyra herself bleeding out on the throne, and I think next season all of Helena's quilts are going to haunt Rhaenyra and make her second guess everything she does and leave her incredibly paranoid. This season ends with Rhaenyra closing Tommen's window, shutting herself in darkness, and I think a final hint that she's not really learned from her mistakes and the kind of warnings she's had here. She's caught up in the ideas of prophecy, but less so with the reality of her political decisions and the consequences. I loved this episode. It's the best of the season, and where the structure has often not quite worked and the pacing has had issues, character arcs have felt meandering, this episode finally brings everything together. They got it right where it mattered most, and I feel happy to forgive most of the issues in hindsight now. I think a lot of what I've said in past videos may feel unfair on reflection now. Even the dialogue this episode felt much more effective, way less clunky than it has in the past. I am left very happy, and next thing I need to do is finish reading Fire and Blood so I can compare this season to what happens in the book, and hopefully make a long video about that. I'm hoping to do that soon. I don't know, we've got a baby at the moment, so it's difficult to find time to read a big long book. Also, there's other videos I should be making. Ted Lasso Season 4 is out, so I'm keen to make some more videos on that. The last one didn't do well for views. Nothing is doing well for views at the moment, which is odd, because all of the videos I've been releasing have a very high click-through rate. All of the people who've been getting recommended them, a high percentage of you are clicking on them, but that's not then translating into the algorithm recommending it to more people, and that's really unusual. Something feels like it's changed in the algorithm that maybe me getting paranoid, but it makes it difficult for me to tell what videos you want me to make anymore. So maybe I'll be making Ted Lasso, maybe I'll be making something else, but at some point hopefully a big long season wrap up and compare to the book of this House of the Dragon. So stay tuned for that. In general, consider joining my Patreon, even as a free member. I mean, you can obviously pay money if you want to get some of the benefits, like joining the Discord server and just generally being a real helpful support to me, but also just joining for free. That's absolutely fine to do. It's the best way to be notified about my new YouTube videos, because YouTube does not recommend things at all well anymore. Even clicking the bell's a bit inconsistent nowadays. But I share all the videos I release on my Patreon page, so that even if you're a free member, you'll get alerts about them. It'll be much easier to find what I'm releasing when I release it. I want to grow that Patreon as much as possible, because I don't trust YouTube anymore. I feel like a lot of this is kind of planning for a future where it may just get worse and worse on this platform, and I need to be prepared. I need to make sure there are still enough of you that can reach me. But otherwise, what did you all think of this season? Comment your thoughts, good or bad. What do you think of this episode? What do you think of my videos? What do you think of the weather? Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time.
And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Luke Gore, Michael Gallagher, Emery, Faithy, DQM, Kinesthetic, Maury, Sebastian, Alicia, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.